Take them away. 3 words. That is all it takes to stop every person in the room cold. The royal midwife freezes mid-step, white linen pressed against her chest. The attending physicians look at each other. Neither speaks. The candles keep burning along the marble walls, their gold light washing across a floor that smells of blood and lavender oil and something heavy, like dread dressed up as ceremony. I am still on the bed, my back against the carved headboard, the birthing gown soaked through, my arms shaking so badly it is a wonder I can hold anything. But I hold on. I hold on harder than I have ever held anything in a life that, until a few hours ago, was not even mine. 3 babies. Impossibly small, impossibly warm. Each one breathing against my chest, like the world outside this room does not exist yet. Like they have decided, without consulting anyone, that I am the only safe place left. They are not wrong. I lift my eyes. My vision is still blurred at the edges, swimming from the hours before this moment, that I only half remember, like someone else's dream bleeding into mine. And there he is, Draven Hawthorne, eldest of the 3 princes. Black coat, gold clasps, dark hair, jaw set like a man who decided the verdict before hearing a word of evidence. His hand is raised, palm open, directed at the midwife. The gesture does not waver. Behind him stand his brothers. Evander, arms folded, eyes fixed on the far wall, anywhere but here. And Cassian, one hand extended, pointing toward the open door, as though the solution to everything in this room is simply to remove it. Your Highness. The midwife's voice cracks. She is older, gray at her temples, the kind of woman who knows when a room is about to break. Please. They are newborns. They need. I gave an instruction. Draven does not raise his voice. He never has to. Remove them. They are 3 hours old. At least allow the Omega to. The Omega, Cassian says sharply, stepping forward, is not your concern right now. Something tears loose inside my chest at that word. The Omega. Not a name, not a person. A category to be managed before morning. I pull all 3 babies tighter. My entire body is trembling. I do not fully understand where I am, or how I arrived here, or why every face in this room looks at me with contempt, or pity, or constructed blankness. But I understand one thing with absolute clarity. Nobody is taking these children. No! My voice comes out scraped raw, but it lands in the silence like a stone dropped into still water. Every head turns. No one is taking them. Draven's eyes finally move to me. Dark eyes, cold in the way that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with distance. The kind a person builds deliberately, brick by brick, over years. He looks at me the way you look at an equation that has been solved and set aside. You do not have the authority. They are in my arms, I say. That is all the authority I need right now. Evander finally moves his gaze. Just for a second. His eyes touch mine and slide away, like he has burned himself. Like looking at me directly is a cost he cannot afford. The babies do not cry. They should be crying. Every instinct I have, borrowed and real alike, tells me newborns cry. But these 3 are quiet against my chest, breathing with the slow rhythm of creatures who have not yet learned to be afraid. As though the presence of all 3 of their fathers standing 10 feet away is somehow, against all reason, a comfort rather than the beginning of a wound. Nobody else in the room notices that. I notice everything. A fragment of memory surfaces from somewhere deeper than my own mind. Not mine, but the person whose body I now inhabit, and dissolves before I can hold it. I know only that I am not the first Alaric to hold these children, but I may be the only one left willing to. Draven takes 1 step forward. His boot strikes the marble floor, and the sound rings like a gavel. He is about to say something final, something I cannot undo once it leaves the room. And then the palace bells begin to ring. Not the quiet bells that mark the hour. These are deep and resonant, shaking the candle flames, moving through stone walls and into the bones of every person standing here, whether they consent to it or not. The midwife goes pale. 1 physician steps backward. Even Cassian lowers his hand. A voice from the corridor, formal, clipped, loud enough to carry clearly through the heavy doors, announces the words that change the temperature of everything. The Imperial Council has arrived. The doors open before anyone has time to speak. 7 of them file in, wearing deep gray robes, moving in a formation so practiced it looks ceremonial, even when it clearly is not. The lead counselor is a thin man named Voss, silver-haired and dry-eyed, scroll already unrolled between his hands, as though he has been carrying it ready for hours. He does not look at the babies, he does not look at me. He steps to the center of the room, clears his throat once, and begins to read. In the matter of Alaric, Omega consort to the imperial bloodline of Hawthorne, He just gave birth, the midwife says steadily. Her voice has found a courage that costs something to maintain. Whatever this is, it can wait. It cannot. Voss does not look up. By order of the Imperial Council, formal charges against the Omega consort are to be read immediately upon delivery of heirs, regardless of physical condition. This is standing law. Charges. They are reading formal charges while I am still bleeding through the sheets beneath me. First charge. Willful defiance of the selection ceremony. The Omega consort, having been lawfully presented with the right of selection, refused to exercise his duty. No justification was offered. No petition submitted. He simply refused. Cassian makes a noise in the back of his throat. Second charge. Violation of imperial succession law. By refusing the selection, the Omega consort created legal ambiguity regarding the line of succession, an ambiguity that now extends to the 3 children in this room, whose parentage cannot be established under any method recognized by current imperial law. Evander shifts his weight. His jaw pulls tight. I have no memory of a selection ceremony. What I carry are fragments, someone else's feelings pressed into someone else's choices, and none of them form anything I can hold and examine. I know I arrived in this body mid-crisis, with no instruction and no warning. Listening to these charges is like receiving a sentence for crimes committed by a stranger wearing your exact face. Third charge. Conduct unbecoming an imperial consort. Conduct that has destabilized the political relationship between all 3 princes of the Hawthorne line, calling into question the legitimacy of their future claims and the integrity of their personal honor. Draven is at the window now, one hand behind his back, looking out at the pre-dawn dark. I can only read the absolute controlled stillness of a man who is furious and has spent years mastering how not to let it show. Fourth and final charge. That the Omega consort, through deliberate and calculated action, entrapped all 3 princes in a situation from which no legal remedy exists without significant, lasting damage to the imperial throne. End quote. The room goes quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something unsayable has been said. One of the babies makes a soft breath complaint against my chest. In the silence that follows, it is the loudest sound in the room. I want to say something. I want to ask how a person stands trial for choices they have no memory of making. Whether any of these men considered that the person in front of them might not be the one they believe they are punishing. I say none of it, because the 3 brothers have quietly moved away from each other, barely perceptibly, just a shift in weight, and they are standing in 3 separate positions around the room. What exists in the space between them no longer looks like shared anger. It looks like 3 men who have been slowly losing trust in each other for months, and have not yet admitted it to anyone, including themselves. That is the most significant thing I have observed since arriving in this world. 3 men who entered this room as a unified front are already fractured at the edges, each one carrying a private version of what happened, and not one of them has compared notes. Whatever made them stop trusting each other started before tonight. Whatever this is, it did not begin with me. Voss rolls the scroll closed with the air of someone completing a routine administrative task. He turns to address the 3 princes with the calm of someone delivering a solution that was prepared long before this room was entered. In the absence of a valid selection, and in the absence of any biological verification method recognized by imperial law, he says, the Council is prepared to offer a single resolution to the current succession crisis. Draven turns from the window. Each prince, Voss says, must publicly and formally reject the children. Nobody moves. The word publicly sits in the middle of the room like something dropped from a great height that is not yet finished breaking. Cassian speaks first. Define publicly. Before the court. Before witnesses. On record. That is not a resolution, Evander says quietly. It is the first full sentence he has spoken since entering the room, and his voice is low and measured, the voice of someone who has learned to treat every word as something with real consequences attached. That is theater designed to look like resolution. It is the law, Voss says, with the particular tone of someone who has found that phrase ends most conversations. Draven walks to the center of the room. He stops between his brothers and the council, looks at all of them without expression, and says, "When? Tomorrow morning. The Great Hall. I am still on the bed holding 3 babies who have not cried once since they were placed against my chest. And I understand, with a clarity that cuts straight through the exhaustion and borrowed grief still pressing through this body, that tomorrow morning 3 men are going to stand in a formal hall before a watching audience and publicly declare that these 3 newborns do not belong to them. I spend the night awake. I count their breaths. I learn the particular rhythm of each. Saren's is the steadiest. Idris breathes a little faster. Kale occasionally pauses in a way that stops my own breath before he continues. I try to understand this world through the small shape of what I hold in my arms. By morning, I have made exactly one decision. The Great Hall delivers everything its name promises: white stone, high ceilings, cold flat light, and rows of witnesses in formal dress who go completely silent when I am brought through the doors. I am still pale, still walking, like each step costs something I cannot replenish. A chair has been provided at the front beside a linen-lined basket. I sit. I fold my hands in my lap and look straight ahead. Draven steps forward first. Full formal uniform, black, gold-edged, every clasp and button placed with precision. He reads from a prepared statement in a flat, official voice. He does not look at the basket. He does not look at me. He states he does not claim paternity, and does not recognize the children as members of the imperial bloodline under current law. His legal and final position. He steps back. Evander goes next. His statement is shorter. His hands, clasped behind his back, have gone white at the knuckles by the time he finishes the final sentence. Cassian's is the briefest of the three. He reads it with the speed of a man who has decided that getting through something quickly is preferable to getting through it carefully. He steps back before the last syllable has left the room. The council notary looks at me and asks formally whether the Omega consort wishes to make a statement. I was not supposed to have one. I could see it in Voss's face before the ceremony started. The quiet assumption that I would sit here and absorb all of it, the way the original Alaric apparently absorbed so much, quietly, until it was far too late. I stand up. I reach into the basket and lift the smallest one. Her left hand has been curled around my finger since birth, and even half asleep she holds on, and I hold her against my shoulder and face the room. I would like to name my children, I say. Complete silence. Not the polite kind, the stunned kind. I name the first Saren, the second Salael, the third Idris. 3 names chosen in the night, belonging to no dynasty and no succession law, and no official record until this moment. 3 names that are simply theirs, given by the one person in this room who showed up without being given a choice. The witnesses begin to murmur. Something moves through the room that was not there when we started. Not contempt and not pity, but the beginning of a question. Then Kale begins to fuss. A soft, building sound. Saren and Idris feel it and stir. Draven, Evander, and Cassian, standing together for the first time since the ceremony began, just by the drift of the room rather than by any intention, shift 2 steps forward, and all 3 babies go completely still. Immediately. Absolutely. The midwife at the back wall goes white. I look at the 3 brothers. Not one of them will meet my eyes, but not one of them steps back either. Nearly hidden behind a far pillar, an elderly palace servant, white-haired, stooped, dark attendant's uniform, watches the basket with an expression I cannot fully read from this distance. He catches me looking, and does not look away. He leans toward the younger servant beside him and speaks quietly, but the hall has gone so silent it carries. I have seen this before, he says, 40 years ago, and nobody listened then either. Nobody asks him what he means. That is the thing about rooms full of powerful people. Everyone is too committed to the version of events they already hold to stop and hear an old man who remembers something the official record does not. But I heard him. Every word. His name, I learned from the midwife that same evening, is Aldrich. He has served the Hawthorne Palace for 43 years. He was present at the birth of the 3 princes. He was present apparently at something else entirely 40 years before that, something no one in this court wants to acknowledge or name. I cannot reach him directly. I am confined to a recovery suite on the east wing. Marble floors, curtained windows, comfortable by any measure. But confined is confined regardless of how tastefully the walls are dressed. 2 guards rotate outside my door every 6 hours. They do not speak to me. The babies sleep in shifts, and when one wakes, the others sense it within minutes. I learn to move before the sound builds, to lift and hold and walk the circuit of the room before Saren's short bursts pull Idris into her slow building sound, before Kale's particular silence tips over into the cry that always catches me off guard. I learn to hold them so all 3 stay in contact with each other, because that is the only reliable way to settle all 3 at once. Not my voice, not warmth, not motion, each other. The moment they touch, they breathe more slowly. On the 3rd day, the brothers come separately. I have been expecting this. What I have not been expecting is how different each of them is from the face they present in public. How much smaller the distance becomes when there is no audience to perform it for. Evander arrives in the morning. He stands in the doorway a long moment before stepping inside, the way someone checks a room before committing to entering it. He looks at Kale first, awake in the basket, staring at the ceiling with the concentrated focus of someone encountering ceiling for the very first time and finding it genuinely interesting. Evander watches him and his face does something that does not have a clean name. The selection ceremony, I say, because I will not let this window close unused. Tell me what you remember. Specifically, his eyes come to mine, sharp, assessing. You know what happened. Tell me what you remember, I say again. What you personally witnessed. A pause. Then, you were given 3 months after your formal court introduction. The law requires a minimum of 3 months before a selection can be formally demanded. At the end of those 3 months, you were called before the council. You walked into the room. He stops. You stood there for 4 minutes. You said nothing. Then you walked out. 4 minutes, I repeat. I counted, he says, like a man who has been carrying that number without a place to set it down. Cassian arrives in the afternoon. He stands farther from the basket than Evander did, arms folded, and tells me he remembers the ceremony differently. He says I said one word before I turned to leave, that the word was wait. Draven comes at night. He does not tell me what he remembers. He stands in the center of the room and looks at me the way a man looks at a problem he has discovered is considerably more complicated than he calculated. Then, why did you not choose? Not a question. Something heavier than a question. I don't remember, I say. That is not an answer. No, I agree. It is not. He looks at the basket. Saren and Idris are asleep. Kale, as always, is not. He is watching whatever the ceiling has to offer, with his usual steady attention. Draven looks at him for exactly 4 seconds. I count, the way Evander taught me without meaning to. Then Draven looks away and leaves without another word. That night, Mira, whose name I know now because I asked, which apparently no one here had done before me, brings my dinner tray and places a small leather-bound book at its edge without making eye contact. She is through the door before I can ask a single question. The cover has no title. The pages are thick and cream-colored, covered in handwriting that is not mine, and yet is in my handwriting. In the handwriting of the person whose body I am now using. I open to the first page. The first line reads, "This is not a confession. These are the things I never had the courage to say out loud." I read through the night. The babies sleep in their familiar pattern. Saren, then Idris, then Kale, each waking briefly, and then surrendering back to sleep. And I read between each waking, tilting the book toward the single lamp burning on the table beside me. By the time the first gray light appears at the edges of the curtains, I have read every page. It is not what I expected. I expected a defense. A clear record of the original Alaric's reasoning, set out in ordered lines like a legal brief. What I find instead is a collection of unsent letters, each addressed to one of the 3 brothers by name, each written and crossed out and rewritten across what must have been months. The first letter is addressed to Evander. It begins, "I watched you train this morning from the upper gallery and I thought, if the law were not what it is, if none of this were what it is, I could tell you that the way you move when you think no one is watching is entirely different from the way you move when you know you have an audience. I could tell you the unguarded version of you is the one The sentence crosses itself out. He starts again. Evander, I am writing this because I cannot say it, and because I need it to exist somewhere, even if only on paper. I love the way you carry silence. Most people fill it because they are afraid of what it might mean if they do not. You let it breathe until it holds something real. I have never met someone who made stillness feel like a full conversation, and it terrifies me, because the law is going to make me choose, and if I choose you, I lose them, and if I choose one of them, I lose you, and there is no version of this choice that does not destroy something I cannot replace. He never sent it. The second letter is addressed to Cassian. You are going to be furious when you find out I wrote this and said nothing. That is fine. You are the only one of the 3 of you who uses anger like a language, like you are trying to say something through it that you have not found the words for yet. I understand that better than you would think. I am not writing this to justify myself. I am writing it because you deserve to know that the morning you brought me to the Eastern Garden and showed me where you used to hide as a child, the crack in the stone wall behind the olive tree, I thought, wherever I end up after all of this, I am carrying that garden with me. It was the first moment in this palace that felt like something real. He did not send that one either. The third letter is addressed to Draven. It is the shortest. You already know. I think you have known longer than you will admit to yourself. The thing about you, Draven, is that you see everything and say nothing, and for months I mistook that for indifference. I was wrong. You pay the most careful attention of the 3 of you. You noticed when I stopped eating properly. You noticed when I flinched at the council meetings. You never said anything because you were waiting for me to say it first, and I never said it because I was waiting for something to change, and neither of us moved, and now we are here. He did not send it. Below the final letter, on a separate page where the ink has been pressed so hard that some letters have torn slightly through the paper, I have made my decision. I am going to formally ask them to change the law. Not for myself alone. For every Omega who comes after me and is handed this same impossible choice, love someone fully or destroy them by choosing, I have prepared a formal petition. If it is rejected, I will face whatever the council decides next, but I need to attempt it first. I need to know that someone, at least once, tried. The page ends there. In the middle of a thought, I turn it over. Blank. I turn the next page. Blank. I hold the book up to the lamp and angle it carefully, and run my fingers along the inside of the binding. The diary has been cut. Not torn. Cut. With something precise enough to leave a clean, straight edge rather than a ragged one. Whatever came after that sentence, whatever he decided next, whatever the petition contained, whoever he showed it to and what they did, gone. Removed by someone who knew exactly what they were taking. Someone did this deliberately, and it was not an accident. I tell no one what I found, not immediately. The babies are 8 days old. They have learned each other's sounds the way people who arrive in the world together seem to learn things. Not by effort, but by proximity and necessity. Saren cries in short, sharp bursts. Idris builds slowly, a complaint gathering mass before it arrives. Kale goes quiet before he cries. A particular held-breath stillness that is different from his ordinary quiet, and that one catches me every single time, no matter how many times I have seen it coming. I learn them the way you learn a new language, when you have no choice and no time, by full immersion, by the immediate consequence of getting it wrong. On the 9th day, I ask Mira to find out anything she can about Aldrich, the old servant from the ceremony hall. She goes pale, nods once, and returns an hour later to tell me that Aldrich is no longer assigned to any public area of the palace. He has been quietly reassigned to an unspecified post. She does not know where. That is not an accident. That is a decision someone made deliberately and quickly, immediately after the ceremony hall went silent. On the 11th day, 2 men come for my children. It happens during the 1 hour each morning, when my body makes the choice for me, and I sleep without intending to. Mira is with the babies. I wake to a sound, small and tight and absolutely terrified, the sound Mira makes when something has frightened her badly enough to pull the volume right out of her, and I am off the bed and across the room before I have fully registered being awake. 2 men in palace livery stand at the basket. The shade of their uniforms is wrong by a fraction I can now see clearly. The buttons are the wrong metal. One of them has Kale, my Kale, who has gone into his particular silence, small face drawn inward, arms pulled tight against his own chest as though trying to make himself smaller. I put myself between the man and the door. Put him down, I say. The man looks almost apologetic. That expression is considerably worse than open hostility would have been. This is a council directive. It is not, says a voice from the doorway. Draven. Not in court uniform, in the plain dark clothes he wears when he has stopped performing for the day, and is simply being whatever he actually is. He looks at the man holding Kale, with a quality of attention that does not need volume to carry weight. Put the child down and leave this room. The man puts Kale down. Both men leave. Draven stands in the doorway looking at the basket where all 3 babies are now making noise. Saren in sharp bursts, Idris building, and something crosses his face that he closes off almost before I can catch it. Almost. He was afraid. Not for the throne. Not for any calculation that has governed every interaction we have had. He looked at that basket and something specifically in him was afraid for what was inside it. He helps Mira settle the babies without asking for any acknowledgement from either of us. When Kale finally releases the cry he has been holding, Draven reaches into the basket and lifts him, one large hand placed carefully under the small head, and holds him against his chest. Kale stops crying in approximately 10 seconds. Draven looks down at him with an expression that contains too many things to name cleanly. He puts him back. He straightens. He says, without looking at me, lock your door, every time, without exception. He is nearly through the doorway when I speak. The diary had a page removed, the final one. Someone cut it out with something sharp enough to leave a clean edge. He stops. His back is to me. I watch his shoulders, and I do not speak, and I wait. I know, he says. Then he is gone. That afternoon, through a chain of 3 progressively nervous servants, each one more reluctant than the last, Mira brings me a location. The missing page is not destroyed. It was not burned or dissolved or lost by any means that could be accidental. It was filed deliberately, sometime in the last 18 months, inside the restricted section of the Imperial Archive. Someone placed it there to be found only by someone who knew precisely where to look, or possibly by no one at all. Mira watches me read the location she has written on a small scrap of paper, and then she takes it back and folds it into her apron pocket. She does not ask what I intend to do with the information. She has learned, in 11 days, that I do not make plans I cannot keep. Getting into the Imperial Archive without a council seal is not supposed to be possible. The palace has spent 11 days underestimating what I am willing to do for information. That is their mistake and my advantage, and I use it without any particular guilt attached. What I have instead is Mira, whose cousin works in the archive's lower cataloging rooms, and the particular advantage of being someone this palace has spent 11 days treating as a solved problem, requiring no further attention. I go at midday during the guard rotation overlap, leave the babies with Mira and the elderly physician who has been quietly checking on them each morning without being asked, and I am back within the hour. The page is a single sheet of cream paper, slightly thicker than the diary pages, which tells me immediately it was always meant to be distinct from them. Not a continuation of personal entries, but a formal document inserted between them and removed when someone decided its existence was dangerous. It is addressed to the Imperial Council, signed with the original Alaric's full formal name, his Omega seal, and a date placed exactly 3 weeks before the selection ceremony was scheduled to begin. I read it in the archive corridor, in the thin light from a high window, and I have to read it twice before I trust what I am seeing. It is a formal petition, exactly what the diary promised, but not what I expected it to say. It does not ask for a delay. It does not request a personal exemption or more time. It proposes a revision to the imperial succession law that would allow an Omega, specifically in cases involving triplet alpha heirs, to formally select all three as co-mates, distributing succession rights equally across all three bloodlines, with a structured governance framework for managing disputes. It includes precedent arguments. It cites existing laws by name. It is a thoroughly researched, formally presented legal document, not a private plea. He did not refuse the ceremony. He chose all three of them. He built an entire legal framework to make that choice possible. He submitted it through proper channels 3 weeks before the ceremony. And someone with the authority to reach inside the council's intake process and remove a document before it could be reviewed did exactly that. Buried it. Filed it in a place it would not be found by anyone who did not already know precisely where to search. I sit down on the archive floor. My legs simply stop holding me. 4 minutes. Evander counted 4 minutes of silence while the person in front of him waited for a response to a petition that was never going to come, because by then it had already been taken. Cassian heard one word: wait. Not refusal, not defiance. The word a person says when they are expecting an answer that has not yet arrived. And Draven said, "I know," which means he discovered the truth at some point along the path between then and now, and has been carrying it alone, which is its own specific and considerable wound. 3 brothers who spent a year inside a story their father needed them to believe, each one holding his version of a betrayal that never took place. I stand up, I fold the page against my skin, and walk out through the archive, and up to the floor where Draven meets with his staff each afternoon. The aide who opens the door takes one look at my face and steps back without being asked. Draven is at his desk. He looks up. I set the page in front of him without speaking. He reads it once quickly, then again slowly. Between the first reading and the second, his hands press flat against the desk with steady, increasing weight. The gesture of a man holding himself physically in place while something large reorganizes itself underneath him. He is quiet for a long time. Not the empty kind of quiet, the kind that is full of something moving below the surface. He chose all of you, I say, because someone in this room has to say it first and say it clearly. He chose all 3 of you and wrote a law to make that choice possible, and someone made sure no one would ever know he tried. Draven's eyes come up to mine. They hold there. The Emperor buried this himself, he says. The words come slowly, with the weight of something known privately and being stated aloud for the very first time. He has known the truth from the beginning. He created everything that followed. The accusations, the rejection, all of it, built on a foundation he constructed deliberately. My father made this. The brothers do not meet together the next morning. They meet that night, Mira tells me. She can read the palace's language, the movement of certain servants, corridors that go quiet when powerful people are doing things they do not want witnessed. All 3 in Draven's private study for 4 hours. No raised voices the entire time. She says that is the detail that tells her something has genuinely shifted, not the length, the quiet. I spend the night with the babies and think about the original Alaric, a person who spent months writing letters he never sent, then wrote a law to change the thing that forbade what he wanted, watched it disappear, and walked into a ceremony room, knowing the answer was never coming. He stood there for 4 minutes while the man who paid the most careful attention counted the silence and called it betrayal, said one word, wait, then walked out alone. 3 days after the meeting, things begin to come apart. not with one dramatic moment, not with a single clean revelation. It unravels the way concealed things always do, one thread at a time, each one pulling at the next. A palace physician who attended the original Alaric during the pregnancy comes forward to Draven's legal counsel with documents. His official records were altered after the fact. He kept the originals. A council clerk who was present when the petition was filed provides written and witness testimony. He logged the document, stamped it received, and was told 3 hours later it did not exist, and his position would not survive if he ever said it did. Voss moves quickly. He orders the archive restricted section sealed, and the guard tripled. 2 clerks connected to the petition's original intake are transferred to the Empire's far borders within 48 hours. They are 3 days too late. Copies already exist in 3 secure locations outside the Council's reach. 2 additional copies have left the palace through channels no counselor oversees. Cassian, who spent those 3 days rereading every legal record connected to the succession dispute, has identified 4 separate inconsistencies, showing that the construction of Alaric's guilt began not in the weeks before the ceremony, but a full year earlier. Someone designed the shape of this in advance. Someone looked at the succession law and at 3 brothers who loved the same person, and decided that the most efficient path to controlling what came next was to make the one person capable of uniting them appear to have destroyed them by choice. The Emperor's name appears in no document directly. It never does in decisions like these. But the authorizations are present, buried inside trade routing orders, disguised as resource allocation adjustments. Signed with a cipher, Draven has seen his father use to approve classified decisions for 20 years. Meanwhile, the naming ceremony has been traveling through the city by word of mouth, through markets and washhouses and guild halls and street corners. An Omega who sat in a formal rejection hall and named his own children with quiet dignity, while 3 princes refused to look at them. Public opinion has not fully reversed, but it has shifted in the way that only happens when people suspect the story they were given was designed for someone else's benefit entirely. I am summoned before the council on a Thursday. 2 guards escort me. I leave the babies with Mira and Aldrich, who reappeared without explanation 3 days ago, and now sits each morning in the corner of my suite, reading aloud in a steady voice that settles all 3 babies better than almost anything else I have found. Voss reads a new set of charges: obstruction of imperial process, unauthorized access to restricted archive materials, conduct systematically designed to destabilize the imperial succession. I wait for every word of it. I have learned, in this palace, that showing impatience gives people the sense that you are afraid of what they are saying. I am not afraid of what Voss is saying. I have been waiting for this room for 11 days. I have one request, I say when he finishes. Whatever you decide to do with me, do not let my children inherit this. Do not allow them to grow up inside the same system that buried the person who carried them for trying to change it legally. Change the law, or I will spend every day I have left making sure every person in this empire knows exactly what was done to an Omega who used the proper channels and was erased for it. Voss opens his mouth. The doors open first. A breathless aide steps in and whispers beside Voss. Voss's hand on the scroll tightens until the paper audibly creases. The Emperor, the aide says, just loud enough for the room to hear, has issued a warrant for the Omega consort's immediate arrest. The Imperial Guard arrives within the hour. 6 of them, in full, formal uniform, moving with the efficiency of people who have performed this exact function before and feel nothing particular about it anymore. The council chamber doors stand open. Nothing separates them from me except the length of the marble floor and a council that has gone carefully, calculatingly still, waiting to see which direction the weight falls before committing to any position. The weight falls from the corridor behind them. Draven walks in first, not in court uniform, in the plain dark clothes he wears when he is done performing and has decided to simply be. Evander is directly to his left, and for the first time since I arrived in this world, he is not looking away. He holds the guard captain's gaze with a steadiness that gives the captain nothing useful to read. Cassian comes in last. He walks a straight line to a position directly between me and the nearest guardsman, crosses his arms, and plants himself there without speaking. Your Highness. The warrant is issued by the Emperor, Draven says, in the tone of someone finishing a sentence that started before the captain opened his mouth, whose authority to issue criminal warrants is currently under formal challenge, filed with the High Legal Council this morning, on grounds of fraudulent suppression of a lawfully submitted petition dated 18 months ago. The challenge was accepted for review. Pending that review, the warrant is suspended by standing procedural law. That is not my interpretation. That is the law. End quote. The captain looks at Voss. Voss studies his scroll, The captain steps to one side. I breathe. The long, specific kind of breath that happens when the thing your entire body has been bracing against simply decides not to arrive. Cassian, without turning around, says quietly, "Are you all right?" It is the first time he has asked me that. "Yes," I say. He nods once. His shoulders drop by perhaps half an inch. On Cassian, that is everything. We return to the recovery suite together. All four of us, which 12 days ago would have required an entirely different set of circumstances to be imaginable. Mira has the babies on the wide bed, all three awake, conducting their usual private assessments of the ceiling. Aldrich is in his corner chair with his book open across his knees. He watches us come through the door and gives one small, decided nod. The nod of someone who has been waiting for something to arrive and is not at all surprised to see it finally has. Draven walks directly to the bed. He stands for a moment, then reaches down and picks up Saren, not tentatively, not with the hesitation of a man who needs to argue himself into it first, but in the straightforward way of someone doing what they should have done some time ago. He holds her against his chest. She curls immediately into him, one tiny fist closing around the fabric at his lapel. He puts his hand over the back of her head and closes his eyes for one full second. Evander sits on the edge of the bed. He looks at Kale for a long moment. Kale looks back with the focused attention he brings to most things he finds interesting. Then Evander lifts him and holds him slightly away to look at him, and the expression on his face is the most unguarded thing I have seen from him in all the time I have been here. "Hello," he says to Kale, very quietly, like a private introduction. Kale considers this for a moment, makes a sound that is neither agreement nor disagreement, simply himself, exactly as he always is. Cassian sits in the chair beside the bed. He does not pick up Idris immediately. He looks at her and says, to no one specific in the room, maybe to himself, maybe to the original Alaric who is somehow present in this space even now, "I'm sorry, for all of it. I should have asked more questions before deciding I already had the answers." Idris reaches out. Her hand finds the air near his knee. Cassian picks her up, and then all three babies laugh. The same sound, at the same moment, directed at absolutely nothing any adult in the room can identify. The first time. In all the complicated history of everything that has led to this room, and this morning, nothing has sounded more earned than that. By afternoon, the news arrives. The Emperor, facing a formal legal challenge he cannot dismiss without triggering a constitutional crisis he does not have the support to survive. 3 sons who are no longer standing at his back, and a public whose sympathy has moved past the point any single decree can reverse, has signed a document of abdication. He does not appear in public to do it. 3 months later, the selection law is abolished. It does not happen overnight. The measure moves through committees and debates that get loud and uncomfortable, because a law that has existed for centuries accumulates people who depend on it even when it causes harm. But it moves. Somleche, Draven drives it. Evander drafts the legal language with a precision that closes every gap before the opposition can find it. Cassian goes to the sessions outside the palace, in rooms where the people are not nobles, and he is less polished there and considerably more effective for it. The new framework does not redesign human feeling by decree. It does not tell anyone how to love or who to bond with or how to arrange a life. It removes the mechanism that forced a choice between people who were never meant to be placed in competition. Future Omegas will not be handed a selection that functions as a sentence. Future Alpha siblings will not have their bond held hostage to a succession calculation. The crown will pass by merit and will, not by accident. It is, Evander tells me on a quiet evening in late summer, the exact framework the original Alaric proposed. 18 months late, at considerable cost to everyone who passed through the events between that petition and this evening. But exact, down to the governance structure and the specific amendment citations. I do not cry when he tells me. What I feel instead is something closer to recognition, the particular feeling of watching something finally arrive at the shape it was always trying to find, when the wrong one kept being imposed upon it. The brothers become legal fathers through a newly created category that requires no biological proof and no prior selection, only formal acknowledgement and the agreement of the Omega parent. I give that agreement in a room with a notary and 2 witnesses and no ceremony of any kind, because I have had enough of ceremonies to last the remainder of my life. They each sign their names in turn. The process takes 4 minutes, which I notice and choose not to mention. We do not discuss the document afterward. We simply proceed, the way you proceed, when a thing that was always true has finally been made official. In the months that follow, we do the slow and sometimes uncomfortable work of becoming people who actually know each other, rather than versions assembled from assumption and grief. Evander and I talk about the diary across many evenings, because some of it still lands hard, and he needs time to move through things that affect him. Cassian and I argue, sometimes about things that matter and sometimes about things that plainly do not. And his anger really is a language, and once you understand a few words of it, the conversation opens into something more honest than it appeared. Draven and I communicate in a register that is almost entirely nonverbal. One true sentence where 10 careful ones would serve no one. That, I have come to understand, is simply how we are. The babies change with a speed that makes every version of them feel temporary before it has fully arrived. Saren discovers that Draven's sleeve, when he is seated, is exactly the right height for pulling herself upright. She does this repeatedly. He pretends each time to be inconvenienced. He is not. Idris moves toward noise and activity with complete instinctive certainty, the way certain things move toward light. And Cassian follows her through every room, saying her name with a complete absence of authority, which she has accurately identified and exploits without hesitation or guilt. Kale observes everyone with the patient, focused attention of someone conducting a long study before drawing conclusions, and then, on an ordinary morning in early spring, without any warning at all, stands up from the floor and takes 3 steps directly toward Evander, who is sitting on the other side of the room. Evander catches him. He holds this small person who has just demonstrated that the world is navigable on 2 legs given sufficient determination, and he looks across the room at me. The expression on his face is not a word I have yet. It includes happiness, but is not only happiness. It is the face of someone arriving somewhere they had quietly, privately, stopped believing they were going to reach, and finding it exactly as they always hoped it would be. I let myself look at all of it. The room, the morning. These 4 imperfect, present, trying people who found their way here through catastrophe and choice, and the particular stubbornness of not leaving when leaving, would have been considerably easier, and the 3 small ones, still learning what their own bodies are capable of. The same family. Built entirely differently the second time. Not because law required it, not because blood demanded it, not because any ceremony or tradition pointed here and said stand, because when the moment arrived where standing meant something real, all 3 of them chose to stand, and I chose to stay. And none of us, across all the months that have followed, have found a single reason to regret it. Some traditions survive because they genuinely protect the people inside them. Others survive only because no one has yet found the courage to ask who, exactly, is being protected, and who has been paying the cost all along without anyone counting it. My children will grow up knowing the difference. They will grow up in a family not assigned to them by fate or law or accident, but built deliberately, by people who looked at what they had done and decided to become something else. That is enough. That is everything. The end. He named them alone, in a room full of people who refused to look. Subscribe, like, and tell me in the comments, did they deserve his forgiveness? Because that answer says everything.